So what I'd like to do in the rest of this opening monologue of our 10th season is ask the same question, where do we find ourselves, from the point of view not of where we find ourselves in space, but where we find ourselves in time. And when we talk about human beings finding themselves in time, what we mean above all is where do we find ourselves in history? At what point in a ongoing history are we located? And that requires us to ask a simple question, which actually has no simple answer, which is just how old are we? And I mean we who in 2014 belong to the cultural age or historical age that is presently getting underway, and which is different than the historical age of even 20 years ago. To raise the question of age, we have to keep in mind that nothing in the universe, be it the newborn infant or the universe itself, is without age. If a phenomenon does not age, it is not of this world, and if it is not of this world, it is not a phenomenon. So we have, on the whole, I believe, a very poor understanding of the essence of age, because our intellect evolved to deal more with objects in space rather than with the enfolded intricacies of growth, duration, and accumulation. That's why we probably find it easier to spatialize time, to think of time in terms of space. In other words, to think of it as a linear or chronological succession of present moments, than to fathom the multidimensional, interpenetrating recesses of age. In fact, we have a stubborn tendency to reduce age to time. And here's the point. What is time if not a prodigious abstraction? What the medievals called a flatus vocis, just a breath of air that's pronounced by the voice that is empty of content. Only age gives time a measure of reality. And we shouldn't allow ourselves to be fooled by the fact that even the most sophisticated philosophers think of age as a function of time. A phenomenological analysis reveals instead that we really should think of time as a function of age. After all, any concept we may have of time ages and is subject to an aging process. Hence, our concept of time today, in the 21st century, is not at all what it was for the ancients. Now, the same holds true for eternity, which shares in the general mortality of phenomena. Eternity no longer appears to us as it did to Plato, for example, when he and his fellow Greeks turned their gaze to the stars. Nor does it appear to us as it did to Dante when he and his fellow Christians turned their gaze to the celestial spheres. In fact, eternity has been largely dissociated from our dynamic, ever-expanding, and mortal cosmos. We now believe that the cosmos had a beginning and that it will have an end. Hence, eternity has largely disappeared from our phenomenological horizons. The timelessness of eternity has grown old, you could put it that way. The timelessness of eternity has grown old, and, for all intents and purposes, has aged itself out of existence. Now, in his book, Creative Evolution, Évolution créatrice, published in 1907, the French philosopher Henri Bergson exposed in a very compelling fashion traditional philosophy's blind tendency to conceive of time geometrically rather than organically. Yet for all of Bergson's deep thinking about la durée, as he calls it, duration, and organic form, Bergson never really put forward a philosophy of age. He offered merely another philosophy of time, one founded on biological rather than chronological paradigms. That represented a significant corrective and contribution, to be sure, yet there's more to the phenomenon of age than biology alone can account for, since humans are biological beings who create transbiological institutions that put cultural and historical elements into play in ways that Bergson, along with most other philosophers, leaves largely unexamined. All living things obey an organic law of growth and decay, and in that respect human beings are not exceptions. According to the riddle of the Sphinx, we walk on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and, if we live long enough, end up on 3 legs in the evening. Yet, as Oedipus discovers, after he enters the city of Thebes, confident that he has solved the riddle of the Sphinx, there is far more to the story than that. The story begins before birth and continues after death. In other words, unlike other living things, anthropos, man, which is the answer to the riddle of the Sphinx, this anthropos is born into humanly created worlds whose historical past and future transcend the individual's biological lifespan. So these worlds, which the Greeks called the polis, are founded upon institutional and cultural memory, conferring on their inhabitants a historical age that is altogether different in nature than biological age. Since no human being lives outside of such worlds, and those worlds all come with their legacies and traditions, we could say that humans are heterochronic in their age. Now, what does that mean, heterochronic? It means that they possess many diverse kinds of ages, all bound up together. Biological age, historical age, institutional age, psychological age, and so forth. So by and by, we can see how these various ages intersect with one another, both in individuals and in civilizations. Now, these various ages intersect with one another, both in individuals as well as in civilizations. So we can note here for the record that once anthropos arrives on the scene, the phenomenon of age increases in complexity at least as much as it did when life first gained a foothold on our planet. Now, the one thinker from whom one would have expected a very compelling philosophy of age, especially as it relates to the human component, is our old friend Martin Heidegger. We've devoted a number of shows to Martin.